I know what a lot of you will probably be thinking, or those of you who subscribe to the channel at least, a video about another YouTuber. That's not really the kind of thing you do, Alfie. And you're right, I tend to make videos about footballers who played 70 years before most of my subscribers were born, and videos on the rise and fall of teams in the German and Russian third tiers who are on the brink of extinction. Other than a sporadic mention of the Irish guy or James on HITC Sport, who are literally my colleagues, I don't think I've ever really talked about another YouTube channel or individual on YouTube. Partly because, despite it being my job, I don't actually watch an awful lot of YouTube videos, and almost no football-related YouTube videos, and partly because to do so would almost be an acceptance of the fact that I too am now a YouTuber, and I'm still far too delusional to concede that point. However, on Wednesday evening, I did find myself watching a video by the True Geordie on his channel The Kickoff whilst I was preparing my tea. The video is entitled The Newcastle Takeover Debate, and I thought it might make for an interesting listen as I peeled potatoes and cut up my carrots. Unfortunately, by about 3 minutes in I was bemused, after 5 I'd had to put down the potatoes altogether, and after 10 I decided I ought to make a video about it, since the True Geordie is a fairly large voice within the UK football related arena on YouTube at least, and I think it's possible, if not quite likely in fact, that some of the views and sentiments that he expressed in that video will be held and now potentially parroted by many others. Inside the first 3 minutes, True Geordie claims that there is 1,000,000% an agenda against Newcastle in the media, stating that, "I feel like because we're working class, or whatever, we're particularly hated by some of these private school brats who become journalists." It's a bizarre claim in truth that Newcastle are hated by the press because they're working class. I mean, for a start, which are the non-working class football clubs? Maybe a few of the London clubs, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, Bournemouth perhaps, all of which are debatable by the way, but by and large all football clubs are quote-unquote working class. Are Newcastle really any more working class than say my club Hull City, or Grimsby Town, Sunderland, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Rochdale, Stoke, Wolves, or Sheffield United? Personally, I would argue they are not. It seems like a very strange point to make as far as I'm concerned, and a real leap to try and self-victimise. As someone who has worked and sort of still works in football journalism, I have never encountered the slightest bit of anti-Newcastle bias. In fact, at HITC and GRV Media where I work, there are more Newcastle fans than supporters of any other club, which one would assume would lead to more generous coverage of the club as a rule. The only bias I've ever noticed within sports journalism is sometimes a slight southern or London-centric one, which I believe is an accident by virtue of where most of the media corporations are headquartered and where a lot of their staff come from, and subsequently who they support and or are more interested in, along with an obvious big club bias since those clubs are the ones who tend to drive the most clicks. True Geordie goes on to claim that for 13 years Newcastle fans begged fans of the media to get involved in their campaign to drive Mike Ashley out of the club. But what exactly did he expect them to do? The implication of that self-pitying would appear to be that no one listened, but that simply isn't the case. I would need more than the 2 hands I have to list all of the owners who are far worse than Mike Ashley, and I don't think any have received as much press coverage or criticism as Ashley has, despite the fact that Newcastle is still a Premier League club. I don't want to critique all Newcastle fans, but I certainly think there is a subsection of Magpies fans who don't realise quite how dire a situation lots of clubs are in. I am far from a Mike Ashley sympathiser. I think he's a deeply uncharming man whose business operations are oftentimes deplorable. I even have more personal reasons to dislike the man, but we won't go into that now. However, it's worth pointing out that there was recently an almost certainly bogus news article written which suggested that Ashley might look to buy Hull City once the Newcastle sale is completed. In light of such news, most Hull City fans were ecstatic, because Ashley is a wildly more appealing prospect as an owner than our current owners, the Allams, and I should add that even the Allams are more desirable than plenty of other owners further down the Football League food chain. True Geordie and a portion of Newcastle fans may just have to accept that no Hull City, Blackpool, Charlton, Coventry, Yeovil, or God forbid Bury fan is going to be lying awake at night pitying the tragic plight of a team that currently sits in 13th place in the Premier League with a £40 million forward leading their line, and zero doubts over the long-term future of their club or their Football League status. And yet, the coverage of the owners of those clubs that I've just mentioned has not been a fraction of the coverage of Ashley. It must be because they're all working class clubs too. The True Geordie follows that up by saying the outrage and moral objection to Mohammed bin Salman's arrival by Newcastle fans would be futile since it wouldn't change anything with regards to the takeover. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but let's just assume that it is. Even so, that is no excuse for turning a blind eye or washing your hands with the whole situation. My moral outrage regarding the Holocaust or the transatlantic slave trade is not going to change anything or save any lives. But that doesn't mean I subsequently take a position of neutrality on the rights and wrongs of mass genocide or the enslavement of millions of human beings. You would have to be morally bankrupt to take that position. Later on, True Geordie's co-host Laurence, who I normally think speaks a lot of sense on the few occasions I've watched their videos or podcasts in the past, intervenes and says that some people are using this to get at other countries and that they don't tend to have problems with American or Russian owners, which is exactly the same point that someone made on my video about Mohammed bin Salman a week or so ago. Now, if we pretend that that is a valid point, and I will soon explain why it most assuredly is not, but even if it was, surely the argument in that case should be in favour of scrutinising all terrible people and not saying, well, X, Y or Z got an easy ride, despite the fact that they have been buying shares in fracking companies, so therefore, why do you have any problem with Saddam Hussein buying Peterborough United? Now for why it's a dreadfully ill-considered argument anyway. Mohammed bin Salman is not a Saudi businessman. He is Saudi Arabia. Whatever you think of Liverpool's American owners, John Henry via FSG, or Bournemouth's Russian owner Maxim Demin, they do not run America or Russia. When the US carries out drone strikes in the Middle East, whatever you think of US foreign policy, or when Russia invaded the Crimea, whatever your views may be on that occupation, they did not do so on the orders of John Henry or Maxim Demin. If Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin were orchestrating takeovers of Premier League clubs, then maybe, just maybe, you could open up that discussion. But until that unlikely event, which still wouldn't actually be equivalent, at least in the case of Trump, since he is not a completely autocratic dictator and there are some checks and balances on a US president, it is a redundant argument. The True Geordie responds to Laurence's point by saying that what makes him sick is that all of a sudden, everyone's a human rights activist. Right on, True Geordie. I mean, the routine public beheading of your citizens, the criminalisation of homosexuality, punishable by death, and no free elections are a bit bad, but what makes me really sick to the stomach is people caring about other human beings. I might be being a bit facetious there, admittedly, since presumably the point True Geordie was trying to make is that he feels some people are motivated only by criticising Newcastle and don't genuinely care about the human rights violations. But nevertheless, it is striking that that is what makes him sick, not anything that MBS does. Perhaps it would have been wise to, at the very least, denounce the abhorrent foreign and domestic policies of their prospective owners. In True Geordie's defence, he says he is still learning about the Saudis and is subsequently reluctant to comment. But maybe, if you're hosting a debate about something, there is some onus to learn and know a bit about what you're talking about. I made a video about MBS last week that's only 11 minutes long. I don't think it would be too grueling to sacrifice 11 minutes of your time to watch that and at least have some semblance of understanding of the severity and depravity of the issues at play. The True Geordie followed that up by claiming that if you look at any Premier League owner, you'll find problems, to which Laurence concurs, stating that any billionaire has probably done something terrible to become a billionaire. I mean, that is just the laziest kind of whataboutery, and it isn't even true. If you're going to try and tell me that there is a moral equivalence between the Norwich City owner Delia Smith, whose worst crime is shouting, "Where are you?" on the pitch at Carrow Road at halftime, and Mohammed bin Salman, then I know you're not capable of a serious debate. To make that claim, you would have to have either a blind allegiance to Newcastle's prospective new owners by virtue of your desperation to see the takeover happen, or a total and absolute ignorance of Mohammed bin Salman and Saudi Arabia. In the case of the True Geordie, I fear that the reason might actually be both of the above. This idea that, well, Mike Ashley equals bad, MBS equals bad, so let's just have a bad person in charge who spends some money, is a point that really needs addressing. It is equivalent to saying, oh yeah, a Chinese burn is bad, and so too is having all of your limbs torn off, cut up into tiny little pieces, fed to a pack of wild dogs, and then your torso thrown into a wood chipper. Yeah, they're both bad, right? So they're basically the same thing. I don't know how many times this needs to be said, but being a nasty, greedy businessman who treats his staff poorly and is unapologetic in doing so is in no way morally equivalent to someone who orders the murdering of a journalist, orchestrates mass genocide, and literally runs a nation with a human rights record so appalling that it would make Kim Jong-un blush. If he's still around to blush, I suppose. I think it's telling that, as far as I heard, none of the 4 people involved in the debate actually said the name Mohammed bin Salman or MBS once. How on earth can you have a debate about the prospective new owners of a football club without actually mentioning the person involved at all? Every reference was to these guys, these people, or just Saudis. Again, I think this is just an ignorance of who Mohammed bin Salman really is, and this perception that he's just another nasty rich guy. This isn't Richard Branson or Philip Green we're talking about here, think more Colonel Gaddafi or Idi Amin. Only then are the actually comparisons exposed for how absurd they really are. True Geordie points out, as many have, that the United Kingdom sells arms to Saudi Arabia. We actually do a lot more than that, providing things like training, logistical support and intelligence. The United Kingdom and the United States, without having boots on the ground, are still one of a number of countries involved in the Saudi coalition's intervention in Yemen. I don't want to go too deep into this, but if you disagree with our government doing that, voice your disagreements. Don't say, well, if the British government is fine with the Saudis, then so am I. Happy days, done. I can wash my hands with the whole thing. What a morally vacuous get-out-of-jail-free card that is. And if you historically took your moral compass from the actions of the British government, or any government for that matter, you would be a pretty sordid human being. Now, I've gone in pretty hard on True Geordie and his co-debaters in that video, and I assure you it's nothing personal. I just think there was a lot of really shoddy, ill-considered, and albeit probably by accident, disgraceful statements made in it. And I think it would be a shame if people watched that video and bought into some of the thoughts expressed in it. Nevertheless, I should end with a point of agreement between True Geordie and myself, and that is that this takeover isn't remotely the fault of Newcastle United fans. I don't believe anyone has suggested that it is, but needless to say, if they have, they're wrong. I have every sympathy with Newcastle fans, who are among the best and most loyal fans in England, and I'm especially sympathetic towards those who are really morally challenged by this takeover. At no point have I said I'd criticise any Newcastle fan that continued to support their club and attend games with MBS at the helm. I know there are some who have told me that they simply couldn't continue to support or finance the club, whilst for others, it was their club before MBS and it will be theirs afterwards. I have great sympathy with both points of view, and I would be equally tested should a similar situation ever occur at my club. That is not an excuse for becoming an apologist for a truly despicable regime, for putting Saudi flags in your Twitter username, or for goading the fiancé of murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi online. That is all from me. As I said, this isn't a type of video I've ever made before, and I have no intentions of making one again. I just felt there were some things that needed to be said in reference to that one specific video. I have no desire to create any YouTube beef, so to speak. I don't want to end up in one of these YouTube boxing matches, and certainly not against this bloke. And I have enjoyed every True Geordie video or podcast I've ever watched in the past. If you would like to watch my video about Mohammed bin Salman, it should be on your screen now, and if not, you should be able to find it pretty easily via the search bar. Thank you all for watching today's video, hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and as ever, feel free to subscribe to HITC Sevens, the 22nd best football channel on YouTube.